Yeah, let me kick it off. It's a faith and family forum, so I'll start with the very first word. I've watched the YouTube videos. You've talked about your faith.
Yeah.
Tell us what your faith means to you and how it motivates you and
Sure.
keeps you going.
Well, thank you all for allowing me to come. My faith means everything to me. I was a young man, married, on the run, had a business that we started from scratch, Armando, Lourdes, and Jeb. And we were blowing and going like you do when you're young and you're trying to provide for your family. And there was a point in 1988 where I just kind of lost my way. I was just overwhelmed, involved in too many things. And one night, reading the Bible, I just got a serenity. The Lord came to me. And from that moment on, I've been a Christian, and it's been a guiding light for my life. I converted to Catholicism after my 1994 election on Easter Sabbath, which was another important milestone for me. I believe in the Holy Spirit. I'm looking for the Holy Spirit to be coming over here the next week in my life to give me discernment and give me guidance. But my faith is an important part of my life. It binds myself with my wife now of almost 42 years. The amazing Maria Columba Garnica de Bush. It informs how I try to be as a husband and a father, and now, thankfully, the grandfather of 4 near-perfect children. So it's important. And then the one other thing that I think is important as it relates to this forum, it's not just a personal, private thing. I had a chance to be governor, where you don't talk about things, you actually have to make decisions. And all the big decisions, every one of them, and I hope we'll have a chance to talk about some of them, my faith was an important part of how I made decisions. I do not believe that you put your faith in a lockbox when you're in public life and say, well, that's only for my private matters. That is totally wrong. And I explained that to the people of Florida. I was totally transparent about it. Final thing I'll say is that compares to Hillary Clinton. In this time where religious freedom now is under attack, and she made the following comment, a version, this is not the exact words, but she said something to the effect of, if you are a person of faith, that's fine, but you're going to have to keep it in your house and keep it in your pews. And religious freedom is really, at least my definition of it, is acting on your faith, is having a consciousness to act on it. It's to do it in the public square. It's to do it with love and compassion, because the faith that we have can help us deal with people that are homeless, the drug addicted, people that are struggling to make ends meet, people that are truly needing our help. That's what my faith compels me to do. And for anybody to suggest that we just got to keep it in our house or keep it in our church rather than act on it, I think is wrong and misses the whole point of the American experience.
Whoa, that's loud. You teed me up very well, Governor, because faith is important to so many people, especially here in South Carolina, but it has become a taboo subject to talk about one's faith in modern American politics. And you start talking about faith, you talk about God, you talk about how it affects your life, people start to put you out there on the fringe. Yet, last summer, it was the faith and forgiveness that was shown by the families of 9 murdered people from Mother Emanuel that I think united this state and united the country. So many other places where there was a tragic incident like that, you would have riots and you would have chaos and anarchy, but here, everyone from across the board came together, and I believe it was the faith of those families that set the stage for that.
We're almost dating ourselves before Emmanuel, before Mother Emanuel,
right.
After Mother. It's that much of a divide in time with us here in the state.
It's amazing.
My question, after setting it up, as president, what role would your faith play in breaking down the political, religious, racial, and economic divisions that divide so many Americans?
Well, first of all, I was coming here to campaign in Charleston. We arrived at midnight, and we couldn't go downtown because of the killings, and so we flew out and came back several days later. And I was watching the arraignment on television, and I just was sobbing of just unbelievable. It just was I don't know if I could have done what they did. I just don't know. It was to forgive that quickly, in such a powerful, loving way. It was the most inspirational thing I've seen on television. That's a low bar, I get that. You know, television these days is not that great, but this was the most moving thing that I've ever seen. And hopefully it will inspire us to allow for people of faith to act in the public square. This is not, we're not, you know, the idea that somehow that if you're a Christian or you're a person of faith of other religions, that somehow you're just intolerant. That's the general kind of the left, how they view it. It's just wrong. And I think the president needs to set the stage to, across the board, try to find unity of purpose again in this country. Our president is a gifted man. He can give a speech. I've been on the backside of a teleprompter when he was giving it. He plays it like a Stradivarius violin. I mean, I'm telling you, he is gifted in ways that I can only imagine how to do it. But he has used that talent to push people down to make himself look better. And frankly, we have a front-running candidate running for president that does the exact same thing. Pushes people down to make himself look big and strong. So I've only made a couple of promises as if I'm president. One is, on day one, I won't blame my predecessor. I was tired of him doing it. I'm certainly not going to do it to him. My brother didn't deserve that, and he won't deserve it either. On day one, whatever the problem is, I'll accept personal responsibility and try to solve the problem. No one will say the dog ate my homework and anything like that. And I will do whatever I can to avoid pushing people down to make myself look big and strong. I will not disparage people with disabilities. I will not disparage women. I won't disparage Hispanics. That's not America. America, we're losing the commonality of purpose in this country now, and we're breaking up in our disparate parts. And if we allow politicians to prey on that, whether they're people of faith or just the diversity of our country, we're going to be in a heap of trouble. Just one quick side personal story. I am celebrating my 63rd birthday yesterday, and my grandchildren, as a surprise, are coming to celebrate it. But my 4-year-old granddaughter told me, she broke the surprise. But her name is Georgia Helena Walker Bush, named after the greatest man alive, my dad. And we call her 41. That's her nickname. But Georgia is a Canadian, Iraqi, Texas, Mexican American. She's a quadra-hyphenated American. Her mom's Canadian. My son is from Miami. I'm a Texan, which is a nationality. My wife's from Mexico. And Sandra's parents are Iraqi Christian. And so when she fills out the form, 18 years from now or 14 years from now, you know, the census form, she'll say not applicable on the whatever you are box. And that's what we need to get back to, Alan. We need to get back to, we're Americans, and we have a set of principles that guide us. And one of those principal values are that we allow people of faith to act and engage in their faith in the public square. It's the first freedom of our country. It is powerfully important to make sure that's always protected.
That's a good answer.
A little long, but I'll sort them from here on out. I had to get my Georgia story in.
Well, Governor, pivoting to the Supreme Court, and you and I have talked about this and we've been on stage before, so I'm going to ask you a similar question. There have been a lot of controversial Supreme Court decisions and a lot of controversial Supreme Court justices. And in the next question, I would like to know your thoughts on justices that you particularly are fond of, and obviously decisions that you think should have been decided differently. But I want to caveat it real quick. 4 of the 9 Supreme Court justices were born in the 1930s, which means the next president could choose probably up to or more than half of the Supreme Court justices, which will leave an impact far probably beyond my lifetime.
You know, I wanted to ask this last time. Who's ready for Justice Ginsburg to retire?
So I would like to know, and I'm sure they would, what types of individuals would you appoint and what questions would you ask?
Well, I've had some practice doing this because I appointed men and women to the circuit, the whole system in Florida, including Supreme Court justices, and I tried to ask them questions that didn't get the Pavlovian response. So it was funny. I mean, you could ask. I always asked. This is not really as relevant to the bigger question. I asked, "What book are you reading?" And if they said, "I'm reading Robert Bork's biography," I'm going, come on, man. You're just saying that because you think I want to hear that. You know, there is a way to ask questions where people are confronted, where they're either trying to appeal to you, they've thought what you think you want to hear, and if they do that consistently, that's a bad sign for me in terms of interviews. But here's the more important than an interview is what is their record? Because people start their journey in the judiciary without thinking they're going to be in the Supreme Court, right? And they're doing their job, and if they do it consistently, if they respect the Constitution, they respect the rule of law, they're not trying to legislate through their judicial rulings, there's a consistency there. It's not what they say in an interview. That could validate it for sure, but it's that record, which leads me to believe that we should not appoint the next president. I would not appoint someone without a proven judicial record, because that's where you get the consistency of a philosophy. The person has to have, incredible intellectual acumen and persuasive skills, but more importantly than that is the fact that they have a consistent judicial record. And in return for that, the President of the United States has to use every lever that they have to fight to get the nomination, because an unproven person who might be good, that's the normal thing. Point someone doesn't have a record because no one will go after him. Well, you can't do that. The left's going to go after whoever we appoint, and we better be ready. And this will be war, and you got to have someone who has a backbone to be able to go through this, and you got to make sure their family knows what they're about ready to get into, because the left will fight to the bitter end. They are mean, they are ugly, and they don't play by our rules. So we have to be strong and have someone that is willing to do this fight alongside the president, and they should never back away. A president should never back away from any nomination to the Supreme Court.
One question we thought about asking you is
just real quick, I like
Yes.
Alito and Thomas for their consistency of their rulings. I'm not a lawyer, but even a non-lawyer can love reading these, and you know who the most fun guy to read. Unbelievable.
Right. Well, that leads into my next question. That is the Obergefell. Did I get that right? The
Yeah.
Obergefell decision. You got to make sure that's on your list of one of the worst decisions of all time. When even some on the left, surely in the center left, were saying that there really is a threat to religious freedom that's sort of embedded in that.
Yeah, it implies it.
Implies
in
it.
the decision.
Some members of Congress have come up with a bill called the First Amendment Defense Act. And I think nearly every one of our congressmen here in South Carolina. What do you think about that? Is that something you would do in your first 100 days?
Well, if the Congress would pass it, which would be a novel thing, that the Congress pass something. And I think they'll start passing things if I'm President of the United States, by the way. That's the difference between a president who uses executive power as the only thing that matters versus a president that's a conservative that wants to get back to respecting the Constitution, not trampling it with executive orders. So yeah, I would support that. And I think it is really important that there is respect for people's religious conscience. It is, as we know, it's the first freedom. And there are ways that now it's under threat. And embedded in that decision, the wrong decision that was made, is not implicit, it's direct, that under consideration, therefore, could be that people of faith might lose their tax-exempt status. People of faith might have rights restricted, might not be able to access government funding if they're involved in social service, in the social service arena. I'm a big supporter of Catholic charities. They're under the gun.
Sisters of the Poor.
Sisters of the Poor. Many of the faith-based groups all across this country now are wondering how this settles out, and this would be an important protection for sure.
Good, yeah. Speaking about other constitutional provisions that are clear, absolutely clear, the Second Amendment. All of a sudden we're debating, I mean, how long has this gone on? We're debating whether or not the Second Amendment means what it says.
If Hillary Clinton gets the 4 Supreme Court justices we're talking about, the Second Amendment won't exist. It just won't. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot riding on this. My view is that the 10 amendments is a package deal. You know, sometimes people, I like the first, but I'm not sure about the second. I like them all. You have to, Interesting story, and I wish I could find it on the internet because people think I'm crazy to bring this up. I promise you I saw this, someone sent it to a link. It was State Senator Barack Obama on an interview with Canadian public television where he was talking in a very thoughtful way about the Constitution. And the Canadian interviewer asked him, what about the Bill of Rights? And he says, well, I don't think it'll ever change, but those are negative rights. That what we really need are a set of positive rights. And the positive rights, and he described, I think it was right to affordable housing, the right to a job, the right to, an income. And it was jaw-dropping to think that the Bill of Rights is a set of negative rights. This is the most radical left judicial philosophy that emanates apparently from the Harvard Law School. And that's what's at stake, is are we going to move to a society where we protect ourselves from our government, that we're a self-governing people, or are we going to do what many constitutions do around the world, which is give the false hope of a guarantee that has to be earned in reality, but in the case of the left, they want to guarantee it as though it could happen that way. And that's what's at stake. Either you believe in a self-governing people, and we have the Bill of Rights is there to protect us from our government, and the Second Amendment is certainly a hallmark element of that, or we give it up. That's what this election is about. Who can defeat the candidate that would erode those protections and allow people on the courts to reverse 200 and plus years of how we've governed ourselves.
One of those negative rights that the President was talking about was the 10th Amendment, which is a positive right. It basically says that any powers that are not listed out in the Constitution as belonging to Congress, the President, or the judiciary are reserved to the states. So it's a restriction on the federal government that if it's not listed, the states get to decide. But too often, regulators in the bowels of various ABC agencies, they regulate through administrative fiat, and I've been involved in nearly 30 lawsuits against the federal government to stop them, and we're currently winning one now. But what I would like to know is, for those regulators, what vetting questions or what kind of regulators would you want to appoint to agencies like the EPA, the NLRB, the Department of Justice, or any other agencies out there?
People that have subject matter expertise. That sounds so commonsensical, but in reality, in the world of Obama, they're political hacks and academics that that believe that they can command and control things they're smart. They want the elites to be able to make these decisions, so centralized government and regulation being their principal means of doing this is the path for their executing on whatever their well-intended ideas. Well, the simple fact is, if you don't have a person that has subject matter expertise, you're going to make decisions as we've seen play out, where the economic costs far exceed any of the social or public benefits. And across the spectrum of the executive orders and the rules that this administration has put in, that's the common refrain. So appointing people that have some humility and also have some subject matter expertise, that they know when they create a rule that there's going to be a consequence. It's just a simple fact, and there should be an economic impact statement effect in every rule. I've proposed a one-to-one relationship, that if you're going to create a new rule that has X dollars of impact, that you have to find another rule to either reduce the cost or eliminate the rule altogether, so that you create parity where you're not growing the costs of regulation in Washington. Secondly, the Congress has in front of them a bill called the REINS Act, where any regulation that has a certain cost, whether it's the direct reports to the president or these independent agencies, has to go back to Congress for an up or down vote based on whether the law itself, whether it meets legislative intent, because most of these rules don't. Thirdly, I would rescind every executive order that's work in progress by this president, because I know the impact. It's either unconstitutional because you've got 30, Scott Pruitt's got 20. I mean, the whole world is suing because they're going way beyond what their bounds are, or it creates an economic impact that exceeds what the social benefit is. So either repeal it and keep it that way, or repeal it and start over. And then finally, to the 10th Amendment question, get back to the business of allowing the federal government to do a few things, but do it much better. And those would be protecting the homeland, protecting the national defense, having an army, having a military that is second to none, that we have military superiority against any any of the challenges that we face, basic research and the things that only the federal government can do. But I'd shift EPA, I'd delegate EPA powers back to the states. I'd delegate as much power from the education department back to the states. Transportation back to the states. For anybody thinking about running for governor, I would delegate the Medicaid program back to the states. I'm not looking at you for a reason, Alan. I'm just saying. You know, let's create 21st century solutions. And that the benefit of being a governor, or look, in business as well, when you have the opportunity to say, if we weren't doing it this way, how would we do it? That is the coolest thing in the world to do. If you have that chance, seize it. Don't miss that opportunity, because most of what government does is mired in the mid-20th century. Shifting all this power back to the states has the benefit of shifting power away from Washington, but also it allows us to recraft how we would create a Medicaid program, or how we would build roads efficiently, or how we would protect the water and the air in our communities, or how we would create better labor conditions for workers without creating economic costs. This is the opportunity of a lifetime, and so I will be the 10th Amendment president. That is my commitment to you all.
Currently, 27 states are challenging the president's executive action on immigration, which is basically regulatory amnesty. He circumvented the will of Congress and the people's elected representatives when he passed it, and I joined with Texas and 26 other states in challenging that.
You'll win that one.
I believe we will. We're winning it now.
You'll win every time, until it's dead. You'll win it. What do? I would repeal it. This is DACA and DAPA, the acronyms for DREAM Act kids and their families. And I have a view that 80% of Americans have, actually, which is a child that's been here through no fault of their own should have a different treatment than their parents who came here illegally. That if they have no nexus to their previous country, they may not even speak the language, they came 15 years ago or whatever, and they're a 17-year-old, that it's not, we can't deport someone like that. So I would treat them differently, but to your point, the president has no authority to do this. He needs to, he needs to put on his big boy pants, to use a North Florida expression, and go to work and convince Congress that this is the right thing to do. I know something about this subject, so I'll give you a little detail. I'm not a lawyer, but the law allows for what's called prosecutorial discretion, which allows the executive to have, on these rare cases where there's some circumstance where a deportation would be inappropriate. So it's in the rare cases they have the discretion to allow someone to stay. That's reasonable, to give some flexibility to the executive. I'm an Article 2 guy. I think it's okay to give the executive that kind of discretion. But with the stroke of a pen, 5 million people have been granted an amnesty for 3 years, I think. I mean, that's not prosecutorial discretion. That is just violating the law. And it will be overturned in the courts, and if I'm president, I would overturn it before that.
Thank you. Real quick question. South Carolina was one of the states that was mentioned as receiving the terrorists from Gitmo.
Yep.
What say you on closing Gitmo?
No.
Okay.
There's no option. This is a legacy moment for the president. I mean, the people that are being released right now, the success rate of being, not going back to jihad is pretty low. The people that have been released before, there were a higher probability they wouldn't go back. Now you're dealing with the harder core people, and they're there. And if they can't come into the United States, and if we release them, they're going to go back in the battlefield to try to attack us and to destabilize the region.
All right, thank you, Governor. Now, the next thing, Oran and I were talking backstage, and a lot of people have kind of ingress and egress come and gone, so we kind of got a new audience. I'm going to ask this question again. The reason I'm asking is because I'm a veteran, and I'm someone who works with law enforcement every day, and Oran and I wanted to recognize the veterans. And I see Senator Mike Fair has been sitting here patiently all day, so these are your constituents, Senator. How many people here have either been a member of the military, related to a member of the military, currently serving in the military, or a member of the law enforcement community, or related to someone in the law enforcement community? Clap. Okay, Oran, you can ask the question.
Yes, Governor, I'm just wondering if being in the military, serving in law enforcement, has the respect for it diminished, and has that come from the top in America? Is there something that a new president, can do to restore respect for the military and for law enforcement?
It has eroded from the top, from the elites, but it hasn't eroded at all from the American people. In fact, I think it's been invigorated and strengthened. The outrage of how veterans are being treated in the Veterans Administration is universal everywhere I go. And I've committed to reforming the Department of Veterans Affairs with career civil service reforms so that veterans get better care just because people don't have lifetime employment protections. We did that in Florida. We eliminated lifetime employment protections. You can't see, I'm way up here, but there's a scar right here. That's the one where AFSCME and SEIU went after me, but we reduced the government workforce by 11% because people just don't have guarantees of working forever. They have to earn it. And that's how it works in the private sector, how it works in American families. It should work that way in government. If you did that in the Department of Veterans Affairs, you could fire a ton of people who are in between the veteran and the care they deserve. Veterans need choice cards where they can go to a private provider to see their private doctor, to go to a private clinic, or to go to the local hospital. That will make things better for veterans. Veterans ought to be given care in advance. We ought to have a case plan, a customized plan before they leave the military so that we know where they're going. Here in South Carolina, you have licensing for everything, right? Teachers, nurses, electricians, plumbers, all of that. Every state has it. Well, if you've garnered that certificate in your field in the military, I would propose that there would be immediate reciprocity. That if you came to South Carolina, you would automatically be a teacher. You don't have to fill out the forms and go back to school. If you've learned how to be a teacher in the military, you're probably a pretty darn good teacher. And if you're a plumber, a truck driver, and everything else, let's just assume that they know how to do it. So here's a place, back to the question of religious conscience. So what would happen if we just decided, we, not the government, we decided there would be no homeless veterans as a country? Do you think we could do that? Of course we could do it. I mean, the idea that you could have every church adopt one veteran. You could have every Rotary Club, every synagogue, every business that wanted to do it. It could easily be done. Well, it would be easier if you had the faith community involved in this. And that's the point. The point is, there should be no homeless people. There shouldn't be a 22-person suicide rate of veterans that have not gotten care, that are mentally ill, that have drug addictions. This is us. This is a definition of us. When we act on our faith or act on our consciousness, we are compelled to solve these problems. When we abdicate all that to government, we get what we have, which is a Department of Veterans Affairs that is focused on the economic interest of the people that work there rather than the veterans they're serving. We've got to change that.
You've created a really great segue into my next question, and that is one of the slogans that we go by as an organization at Palmetto Family is defending and strengthening families. And the defending sometimes is easier because it often involves some piece of legislation or that we're for or against or some initiative that we're taking. But the strengthening, the actual making families stronger relationships between husbands and wives and motherhood and fatherhood. I know some governors have tried to do this. I think Frank Keating, maybe in Oklahoma. Is there a way for a president to actually help make families stronger in America?
Sure, there is. It's politically correct, I guess, now to suggest that a husband and a wife, a man and a woman, that are organized around loving their children with their heart and soul is just one choice. If you have that view that that's the choice that will create the greatest possibilities for families to be loving and wholesome and that children will have a chance to succeed, then you're being judgmental. So there's always that challenge, but the simple fact is the data, if a Martian social scientist came down to study this point, they would say that that is the more likely successful structure for family for children. It's been that way, and there may be other forms that are equally as important and good. I'm not passing judgment here, but to not try to strengthen family life we do it at our peril. When you have a 40% out of wedlock birth rate and you expect a good result, we do it at our peril. And when we think that this is only in one segment of our community, we're missing the changes in our culture. White out of wedlock birth rates have gone from single digit in the 1990, I believe, to now 32%. The world's changing in our midst, and government is actually, in some ways, a catalyst for this. So one of my proposals, back to the 10th Amendment, is to take the three large entitlement, or not transfer program, welfare programs, housing, food stamps, and TANF, the welfare transfer programs, put them in a lump sum, send them down to the states, and require outcomes, basically have outcome objectives, which are to lift people out of poverty. And the three things that you can do to lift people out of poverty: a robust education where a child graduates from high school, college, and/or career ready. About a third of our kids do. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, and I'm being generous. Requiring work rather than non-work, where non-work should not be a better economic benefit than people are struggling. There should be benefits, and you can do that in certain, there's ways to do that. And third is marriage. Those are the three ways to be lifted out of poverty. So if you could imagine $130 billion being shifted back to the states to allow them to create a 21st century welfare program that lifts people up rather than keeps them trapped, where you have to be a single mom to get Medicaid, where you have to get, in many states, you have to be a single mom to be able to get food stamps for your child, where there's been waivers of the work rules in TANF, that if you could recreate that, you could probably end up creating a more likely strong family kind of solution to this, which has to be part of it. Then the public part of this, the presidency is not just the prime minister, right? The person that's in charge of passing laws with Congress. They're also, the king in the sense of the symbolism of the job, where the public persona of the presidency has power. The bully pulpit matters. This is a place where I think President Obama missed a real golden opportunity, because he has a stable family, loving children, great balanced children from what I can tell, a strong relationship with his wife, and he could have shown that as a model for others to emulate. And I don't think he's done it as much. Maybe he's a private person, but I think that's important. I think how you lead your life as a president is as important as the 5-point plan you have to deal with whatever subject it is. And restoring decency back to the public life. I mean, is anybody here worried about the front-running candidate shouting out obscenities in front of children? This is like, what is going on? It's just, I guess I've had a little close front row seat, watching history unfold, just given the uniqueness of my family. I can't imagine my dad. It's just like, not gonna do it. Or, my brother, who always wore a suit into the Oval Office, because he walked in there, he thought, this is hollow ground. This is important. The public part of this is important, and marriage and family is in essence, the single most powerful political institution in our society. When that erodes, all you do is place increasing demands on government.
Governor, real quick, I want to pivot to the environment. You've already talked about it a little bit earlier in your comments. Right now, there's one regulation, and one thing that we see the administration do, when they can't pass a law through Congress, they try to do it through regulation.
And then you sue them.
And then we sue them.
And then you win.
And the AGs, yeah, that's right. And one of them is WOTUS, Waters of the U.S., and I mentioned it earlier.
Repeal it.
It basically allows the federal government to land grab your private property.
So think how Florida would work with when they fully implement the waters of the United States. All we are is one big water body.
You are.
And
your state's a navigable water.
Exactly. So the Army Corps of Engineers is going to have to build a 180 story building to be able to have all the bureaucrats to grant permits. It's going to be wild.
But my question really is, as conservatives, we obviously want to protect the environment, hence conservative.
Yeah, there you go.
We want to conserve the environment, but we want to balance that against the cost and the reality of the cost of regulations being passed on to businesses, and families.
Yep.
I think the president plays an important role in that, and I'll just take quick 30 seconds to answer that, and then Oran's going to tee you up on another question.
Well, again, I would create a regulatory budget that had outside an independent group that would actually make an intellectually honest assessment of economic costs. Because there's always a social benefit, a well-intended social benefit to whatever rule is, and most of the time it's outweighed by dramatic costs that create an environment where we have more businesses closing than starting, and confusion, and power being sucked out of communities and families away from us to Washington. So a regulatory budget, using the 10th Amendment to push power back to the states, repealing as many of these rules that are work in progress, and then reviewing all of the new rules to go back into the rulemaking process. And there's another element of this that you probably know more about than myself. In Florida, we call it the Administrative Procedures Act. I don't know what they call it in DC, but there should be fewer people that have standing, and there should be a shorter time frame for the litigation side of rulemaking as well, because that's how they roll. There's an iron triangle between liberal environmental groups, bureaucrats, and politicians, and the Obama administration will lay down and will accept settlement of a lawsuit because they're actually acting as a surrogate for their ideology, right? And so there should be reforms of all of this, because that uncertainty has created the most tepid economic recovery with the least capital investing into the heartland of this country. The real economy is really flat. The other elements of the economy, retail sales and the like, are bumping along, but we need to get back to investing in the real economy so that you can get higher wage jobs, and that won't happen with the regulatory environment we have right now.
Good.
The English parliamentarian and social commentator William Wilberforce talked a lot about stewardship, and this little pin I'm wearing that represents our organization has the stars. One of our core principles is stewardship, as in stewardship of the earth that we've been given to look after, almost like co-creators with God as we manage and look after His creation. I'm wondering, when it comes to energy, what you would think about renewable sources of energy. Should we, as people of faith, Christians, encourage clean alternative sources of energy? The University of South Carolina has a hydrogen research group. There's wind and solar and many others. What do you think about that?
I do think that we have a duty to protect the natural systems and the critters. But for us we are guided by our faith to do that, and it's important. It's an important value, I think, for people, particularly the Christian faith, but I'm sure other faiths have the same, feel duty bound to do the same. Here's where I veer off a little bit from my religious leader, Pope Francis. The climate change debate needs to be focused on science, real science, because you can make decisions that will hollow out the industrial core, lessen economic activity. You could have no one working, and you'll end up with a smaller carbon footprint. But if you have no one working, you're not going to have the resources in order to invest in the long-term disruptive technologies that might bring about low-cost renewable energy. You won't have it unless you just believe that continuing to indebt your children and grandchildren is the proper path, and I don't think anybody in this room advocates that. So the better approach would be the approach we took in Florida, which is we protected wild Florida because it was in our economic interest to do it. 95 million people come to Florida. They don't come there because we've abandoned the Everglades or abandoned the ecosystem that is unique. People like to live, they like to go there to enjoy the natural beauty of the place. So we created the largest land purchasing to protect, over the next generations of time. But it happened because we were growing our economy at 4.5%. We generated revenues and people's income grew as well. The climate change debate has to be one focused on reality. The climate's changing. Man has some impact. I think most people would agree with that. Where it gets debatable is when will the impact become apparent, and what is the impact? And we have to have a policy of adaptation, which should be a bottom-up policy. The federal government's role ought to be to invest in the long-term things that will create the acceleration of the next disruptive technologies. I don't think the federal government should pick winners and losers. There is no such thing as a venture capital arm inside the Department of Energy. They tried it. It's called Solyndra. Every one of those deals was a complete unmitigated disaster. Let the markets work. Eliminate the depletion allowance, the tax deductions for the oil and gas sector, for the sun, for wind, for algae, for all this stuff. Let markets work. Simplify the tax code. Stop trying to pick winners and losers. There's someone in a garage somewhere in Greenville that has probably got a better chance of disrupting the order of things as it relates to energy than, a bureaucrat inside the Department of Energy. That approach would be a far better approach and a faster approach to get where we need to be.
Thank you.
And it might be hydrogen, who knows?
Yeah,
but let's don't say, well, this is what it's going to be, because every time the government does that, I'd bet on the other team.
Yeah. We were all shocked as a nation with some of the videos that came out last summer, and we have one of those videos. It's very brief, but trust me, it hasn't been heavily edited. But we want you to look at it, and I'm not going to say anything more after except just ask you to react to the video you're about to see.
We've been very good at getting cars on the road because we know that so I'm not going to crush that part. I'm going to basically crush below, I'm going to crush above, and I'm going to see if I can get it intact.
A lot of people want intact parts these days because they're looking for specific nodes. AV nodes, SA. I was like, wow, I didn't even know. Good for them. Yesterday was the first time she said people wanted longer. And then, like I said, always as many intact livers as possible.
Yeah, that would definitely get people to say, I'll do it for the same price and I'll do that.
Every time I see that, it just makes me sick to my stomach. Horrible. That's why we ought to defund Planned Parenthood, and I did it when I was governor. It's disgusting. So here's the practical way you can do it. There's the Title X funding. The Planned Parenthood gets money from Medicaid and Title X. Title X monies under Reagan, he, by executive order, said that any abortion clinic won't be able to receive the money. And it was immediately, there was a lawsuit, and it was upheld. So half of the money can be done by executive order, by Title X. You don't have to get into the big battle in Congress for half of it, and I pledge to you on day one, we will apply the Reagan rule as it relates to Title X monies, and that money will no longer be spent by Planned Parenthood. The second part of this relates to Medicaid funding, and there you do have to have a change you have to go to Congress, and I will go to Congress to work to defund it, just as I did when I was governor of the state of Florida. And what I would do is to encourage states to do what we've done, which is to, instead of spending money for abortions, spend money for crisis pregnancy centers, which is what we did in the state of Florida. Today in Florida, $4 million of state money, state revenue, goes to the Crisis Pregnancy Network in our state to provide for the therapeutic side of their mission, so that it allows for the folks that are there acting on their faith to be able to minister to women that are having to make this difficult decision. It is a life, sin. It's hugely important for the agencies. It's allowed them to go raise additional monies. It has allowed them to have a strong footing to be able to expand their services. That's what I would do. I would do what I did, which I'm a little different than other people because I've got to do it. And others talk. I've had the chance to serve. And you can see what I did to get a sense of what I would do. Others, you just have to count on them saying what they're doing is what they will do. I hope that gives you some confidence, just as it does for Supreme Court judicial nominations, that they have a proven record. There are people that are running for president that have a proven record as well, and I hope you look at mine.
Governor, we got about 2 minutes left. In just a second, we're going to have 2 minutes, and I would like to give it to you to basically talk to the folks here who've come out to see you. Before I do, though, I want to give you a birthday present.
Another one.
Yeah, it's this commemorative koozie and half-drunk bottle of water.
Bob Jones water.
is Bob Jones
Yeah, it was
Water
safe.
and a conservative leadership project koozie, and so
Wow.
I expect to see that on the campaign trail. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
You have the stage, Governor.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll be brief. I think this election should be about who you believe should be sitting behind the big desk as President of the United States in the Oval Office. Because something's going to happen. It always does, doesn't it? There'll be an attack on our country or a great challenge. And the question is, who do you want to have as President of the United States for the unforeseen event, the one that no one can anticipate? And my case is that I have had a front row seat seeing how it can be done the right way. And I've served as governor in a state, a swing state, where a lot of things happen. And I was true to my beliefs. My backbone was solid. My heart was big. I had a brain to figure out how to solve problems, and I never abdicated my responsibility. Whenever there was a problem, I didn't say the dog ate my homework. I didn't blame somebody else. I ran to the challenge, whether it was 8 hurricanes and 4 tropical storms in 16 months with $150 billion of damages. You never heard me blame FEMA. You never heard me blame anything. I was all in, and the state was better off for that principle-centered kind of leadership. Our country desperately needs a president that has the same heart for people. It is not about me. It's not about anybody on the stage tomorrow night. It's about people that are struggling right now, and I know we can fix these things because I have a proven record to show you that it can be done. I hope you want someone who has a compass that points north, that has the courage of their convictions, but also the good-naturedness to be able to forge consensus when it can be done. I'm sick and tired of politicians dividing us up in our disparate parts. We now need a leader to unite us again so that we can restore American greatness and keep us safe. I ask for your support. Thank you all very much.
You did a great job. Thank you so much, Governor.
It's always fun to be with you.
It's fun to be with you, too.
We're going to, thank you.